with these shifts in the real estate market, a lot of agents are running for the hills. And meanwhile, we have agents such as Jasmine here who are actually knuckling down. Uh, so let me introduce one of our new-ish agents. Jasmine, why don't you do us a favor, introduce yourself for us?
Okay, Jazmine. I am with Keller Williams Landmark. I've been an agent for about a year. Just made my anniversary last week. Before I started, I was in the private sector working medical malpractice, done some fashion, studied nutrition, um, and I do have a full-time job. I work for the city, and I do this as I can't really say part-time because it's kind of my second full-time job because there's really no part-time to real estate.
Yeah, I think that's unfortunately, I think that's one of those potential myths that I mean, I know there are some folks that make it work part time, but it's tough, man. Especially when you're first building out your your book of business. But I'm curious though, what got you interested in real estate in the first place?
At my current employment working for the city, there are a lot of resources. One of the resources is discuss financial planning, which kind of brought out ideas and discussions regarding what other methods are available for generating additional income. City workers, we don't get paid that much. So real estate came up, and I said, okay, let me check it out. I got some information from a colleague. It took me several months to follow up, but then I started doing a little more research, and I realized that I could take an online course. So I said, if I can do it on my own at my leisure, let me check it out. And I did, and um, it took me a little bit longer than most, maybe, possibly. Um, but I got through it, and I'm here.
I I feel like a lot of times when it comes up, they're like, "Oh, well, I'll just invest in real estate," and you decide to come jump in as an agent. That's an interesting. It's not even a pivot, is it? It's like an interesting step that you took there. Um, and I guess what were some of the assumptions that you're basing your decision on, and how like has that have any of your assumptions been correct ever since you started as an agent, or did you like how did that transition work out for you?
the The courses were a lot more in depth than I had imagined. Um, no one really kind of sat me down and had a discussion in terms of, okay, so you're thinking of getting involved with this, what kind of time can you put into it? What's the extent of your involvement you could dedicate to it? Um, that would have been some helpful information. Uh, I was totally under the assumption that I could do this part time, work Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and then work at this on the evenings. I am doing my best right now to make it work. I do block out my time in the evenings. I've scheduled my own personal time off. I schedule time for decompression in between uh, making calls and generating leads. Um, and aside from that, there was so much information that was taught in the real estate course that really had like minimal to any kind of bearing on what actually goes on the day to day, the things that you need to look for, the things that you need to prepare, where your focus should be. That's not something that you can learn in a textbook.
I mean, that's I feel like that's gonna be one of those unfortunate truths, right? Oftentimes, there's this. I mean, this holds true. I believe for the real estate industry, the barrier of entry is low, and unfortunately, for me, it kind of falls under the pitfalls with the other lines of education, where even if you went to college, oftentimes you don't really learn the industry experience stuff in the classroom. You learn it in the workplace. And with real estate, I mean, you do have the fundamentals that they teach you during the class, but you quickly find out that the real depth of learning is done through trial and error, right? That trial of fire is brutal, and I imagine in the year that you've been here, you've already seen burnout at, for some, it's an alarming rate, right? I think when I started, I was seeing probably another dozen faces every week, and by the end of the month, I would see like a handful less, and I'm like, that's okay. I mean, and for me, I feel like your approach, and granted, I don't know the nitty gritty, right? But the fact that you are taking these steps to time block to actually set aside designated time for you to get this stuff done, it's hopeful. I find it encouraging. You know, it is a little cheesy, right? But it's it is what you make of it, and I find it very interesting, right? Because I'm by no means I'm not gonna be some top one percenter this year by any stretch of the imagination. But when you bump into people like Miss Canale, which shout out to Patricia, I mean just straight up assassin, right? And it's the beginnings can be frustrating. You're building a book of business, and how has that process been so far for you? Is it? I imagine it's not going to be a walk in the park, but has there been like kind of any things that you feel like, oh, like this is jiving, and other things you're kind of like, this is painful.
Well, like I try to, like I'm looking to different avenues and different resources for, information and something that will try to keep my eye on the prize, so to speak. It's really not a hard job. I realize that. It is putting in the work and, just moving past the obstacles. You know, there have been a lot of discussions, in my personal life as well as with colleagues in real estate and through some of the programs and classes that they offer here. It's also referred to in Gary Keller's book as the one thing. So what's your one thing? It was very difficult for me to figure out at first what my one thing was and how to go about that. I actually think that just part of this conversation, to be quite honest with you, I think I realized what my one thing was and why I really got into real estate. It's like an epiphany right now. Um, it was really to sell my house, and I sold my house, and I was so driven by that that's what's gotten me this far. So now that one thing is complete, I definitely I want to build on that.
Obviously, like other things in life, I feel like getting in this business, you're gonna often stumble upon it's simple, it's just not easy, right? The grind in terms of lead generation day in day out, trying to manage and juggle all these different hats, and then well, fortunately for most, looks like they're, depending on how the class action lawsuit with for the realtors pans out, that might make things a little harder. But it's at the core of it, the people who seem to consistently do well, they rely on consistency, right? And so I feel like, if you are still working through it, and it sounds like you are, like, I feel like it's just be one of those matter of times. And I remember when, I think it might have been Camille in the office. One of the most unfortunate things is commonly people quit right as they were about to hit their breakthrough, right? And when I see some folks who are just kind of they talk about their tribulations and their struggles, and they're like, my usual follow up is going to be, well, what are you doing about it, right? Like, what's the approach that you're taking to figure out what your next step is? Because at the end of the day, those who succeed seem to be those who figure it out, right? It doesn't matter whose fault it is. It doesn't matter, who did what, or who's failing it was, or who's not helping, who is helping. It's like, no, it's my business. It's my business. So if I fail, that's my fault. If I succeed, that's on me. And now that I see some more of like folks who started around the time I did, and they're like, yo, like we're about to cap, we're about to hit these like metrics. I'm like, damn, dude, like let's go, let's go. But it's consistency, right? I find it sometimes maybe I'm an odd duck maybe, but like when I see folks in the office who are hitting their stride or like hit these achievements, for some reason I get super happy. And uh a small part of me is thinking, I'm like, shouldn't I shouldn't that give me like a little something extra for me to be like, you know what, I need to like double down and like outdo them. And for me, for some odd reason, I'm very happy to see them with their W's. It's maybe an odd thing, trade on my
Yeah, you want to capture a little bit of that glow and learn from them and maybe implement it yourself. It's just kind of like, okay, it's not, it's not impossible. It's not impossible. And there have been quite a few times where I haven't been at my 110% or my, whatever. But, I doing everything I can to get back on the horse. So this past year has not been an easy one personally or otherwise, but I do see what you're saying. There are a lot of people that unfortunately give in before their prime, before they realize how good they could have been.
and let's talk about that, right? I my assumption here is if you've not hit any snags or struggles yet, um, me honestly, my assumption is going to be you're probably not going to be around for long because my assumption then is that you're not really doing anything, right? So, um, you was there anything that was particularly helpful when you hit? If you want, you could not divulge what the actual struggle was. But at times you had it, like, hit snags, whether it's with a deal or some kind of evolution or progression throughout your real estate agent career. What has been helpful?
Struggles. I mean, personal, family, some financial. I, not being able to be in the office as often as I'd like to because I do have a 9 to 5. But trying to stay as connected as I possibly can within my abilities. So that's like Facebook, trying to come into some of the classes. I take time off. I don't take vacation. I take time off to come into the office and participate in a class. Or to go to an event or something like that and socialize and try to build those relationships. Could they be better? Absolutely. I'm not giving up, and I hope nobody here is giving up on me either. But it's really just when I see that I'm not at 100%, I will allow myself. I mean, honestly, I'm gonna allow myself some time. I've had some family issues, and I had to attend to those. I could not attend 100% to my business. I'm gonna allow that for myself because sometimes that's just gonna happen. So then the next time I get on the horse, I just got to hit a little bit harder. I got to push a little bit harder, and then build momentum, and then something else comes along, and then you might fall off the horse. This is my story. I start developing momentum and I fall off, and then something happens and I get back on the horse and I try to do a little more momentum. And I recently took the bold class, and that was pretty awesome. And then I hit a personal snag. And I'm getting back on the horse now.
I mean, for me, I get the sense that your pain tolerance is fairly high.
Well, I'm a mother of 4.
Oh, so yeah, you're. Well, I mean, it's evident, right? I mean, usually when people speak of their journey through this, it ends up being like, oh, like I tried this for 3 months and like, this was nonsense, and so yeah, I'm done. Okay, and if when unfortunately, for some of the agents that I've reached out to, and that just completely within months they were like, I'm done. Um, the best I can say is, best of luck to whatever it is that you're working on, and because this isn't for everyone, right? I do always encourage folks to have their own business, one whether it's a side hustle or whatever. But the reality is, not everyone's cut out for it, right? Especially this particular industry, which it'll gut you, man. Like if you can't deal with that high pain threshold, you're done, right? And the fact that you keep coming back.
I worked in fashion, and that is, I mean, they won't even blink before they cut your throat. It's just, and they'll smile while they're doing it. So, yeah, this is a cakewalk. This is really like a cakewalk for me.
And it's gonna be interesting to see what the next progression is, right? Because um, it really is one of those things where you're gonna get knocked down a lot and consistently, right? And like one of the beauties that I've found is that every time I've hit a snag, and if I reach out to, some of the KW family, and I think we're lucky in that respect, because I've heard some horror stories from other brokerages. Not all brokerages are equal, right? I think you're gonna find that quickly. So like thankfully we have a family in which that as long as you're not only complaining, right? Because I imagine most people have thresholds, right? They have limits. But when you do hit snags, thankfully the family there has been there for me. At least for me, I can speak for myself. Whether it be words of encouragement or like, hey, look, if you have X, Y, and Z problem, why don't you take this approach? Kind of like a coaching, mentoring mindset. If you haven't yet, which I don't imagine you pass up on. I would lean into the family. They have been more than generous, at least to me, with their time and wisdom. And I think we might have another all star coming up in the works. I mean, there's even looking at your facial expressions right now. There's a little bit of I sense a little bit of feist in you, which can be alarming. But I think there's a level of like don't I don't play, right? I think there's like that stern like don't play with me.
This came at the right time in my life. I was ready for the challenge, and I I really want to see this through.
So let's get into some what have I learned, right? Uh, as it pertain as an agent, right? What are some things that if if it's your kid saying, hey, mommy, I want to get into this real estate thing, whether I'm buying or maybe they have a house and they want to, or a friend of ours wants to sell. Like, what were some things that you wish someone told you that now you can impart on them?
Um, if my kids were selling a house,
hmm So let's say, or maybe they're looking to buy their first home, right? Whichever the scenario is, right? What are some bits of wisdom that you wish you could impart on your loved ones, or like things you wish they knew?
well, the first thing that I wish they would do is call me and let me help them. Um, if for God, for some godforsaken reason, I couldn't help them, maybe I was out of the country or something or other. Just finding somebody that they can trust, somebody that they can confide in, somebody that is going to really walk them through the process, someone that they feel that they can trust. That's a big one for me. Um, you know, uh, I when I talk to my clients, I will um, just explain some basics, open it up for them to, have questions that I can elaborate on, um, trying not to, per se, overwhelm them, but really just having someone to trust, to confide in, to feel that, they are being taken care of and not being taken advantage of, that it's not just the bottom dollar and the turnover, that it's about caring. It- that's what's important to me. That's what I would tell my kids. If you can't trust someone, don't work with them.
Now let's go into more of the let's go into some pitfalls that we may be experiencing. If you were to say, let's say one of your kids say, "Hey, mommy, I want to go buy a house. What are some things that I need to be careful of?" You have any words of wisdom for them?
Specifics would be to first and foremost take an in-depth look at that first tour of that property and make absolutely sure that it is what they say it is. Um, a personal experience from a gut and a reno that actually was not simply a gut and a reno. There were biohazards and asbestos and termite damage, none of which were previously disclosed prior to the first walkthrough. Um, that's, you have to be vigilant. Not not everyone is gonna share everything off the bat. So I would, also have them have a second set of eyes, have someone that's going to be there to, point out certain things that they may or may not notice, and actually maybe even pick it apart a little bit and really just discuss the pros and cons of it. What's worth it, what's not. A small crack in a window could be replaced, versus, a foundation crack. Is that really a water leak? Could there be molds back there? There are certain things that on the surface are not necessarily obvious, but to have a second set of eyes, someone also that they can confide in and trust, and can just make them think about the whole picture, not just, the surprise of, hey, I'm gonna get to buy my first place, or and sometimes our eyes are bigger than our stomach, so to speak, and our eyes can be bigger than our wallets as well. So, um, you know, so
No. Yeah, I think I've definitely had my share of that. Um, First, there's, I know that we're on the back end of one of the craziest housing cycles we're likely to see in our lifetime. Um, but there have been a lot of crazy things that happened with that. But yeah, one of the things that I will always tell someone to never give up, unless it's some absolutely insane discount, is your inspection. Never, 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 never forego your inspection, unless, I mean, it'll have to be some astronomically obnoxious deal where then it really doesn't matter. Or if like I'm gonna tear the whole thing down anyway, maybe, right? But for me, it's the experience of knowing, which way we need to go, right? I know there's sometimes people will make mountains out of anthills, where it's like, oh my God, there's like lead in the paint. I'm like, that depending on when the house is built, almost most buildings have lead in paint, right? There's going to be asbestos in your house. The problem is, how prevalent is it? Where is it exposed? Is like, there's always mitigations, right? So for me, like you said, it depends on what the whole situation looks like, right? If it is a legit problem, well, are the sellers willing to negotiate, right? Or remediate this themselves, right? It's like, there have been too many times where they're like, "Oh my God, it has X, Y, and Z, and we gotta walk." I'm like, why? Why? Like, if we could get it to a price that makes sense, right? Then are you willing to walk away from this house, or at least like not make an offer to mitigate the difference? Like, are you really just gonna say no? And some people won't, right? Some people just for whatever reason they won't. But like there's a little bit of experience in there where if the foundation has issues, okay, you know what? That's a different conversation. And obviously, at the end of the day, real estate, all things real estate, everything's negotiable, right? And if they're not willing to budge, well then that's a different thing altogether, right? But at the very least, for me, it's put a price tag on it. Put a price tag on it and see at what point does this make financial sense. And the other side of it, I'm finding it kind of breaks my heart, but there is one of the things I commonly now push back on is, don't focus exclusively on your pre-approval or pre-qualification, because That is what the lender is saying that you are cleared for, but that is not necessarily what you can afford. And I know people are like, "Oh, what does that? What do you mean? The bank said I could afford it." No, 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 no. The bank said that they're willing to give you a loan up to that amount based off of basic financial information. That does not mean that you could actually afford it, depending on your actual personal monthly spend. I I know a lot of people lose their heads on this, but you know, if you buy too much house, I find that long term, if you could bear through the pain, is it likely going to be worth it? Probably, right? And honestly, long term, probably, but it could also get you in trouble too, right? If you buy a property that has appraised a lot and the property taxes spikes more than like you are, levied up to, levered up to your teeth, and you're barely paying for your lunch and dinner, and now property taxes spike up and whatever, you're going to be in a world of hurt, right? So things like this, I think, it comes with experience.
But it's definitely at least a conversation you should have with them, with a potential client. Say, we all know that, especially now in this market that we're living in a market of inflation, we may be, we are in a recession, we're not in a recession. Who knows? It's just, but in the same in the same breath.
I feel like it's the fundamentals that count, right? Like upswing, downswing. My crystal ball is broken, So you know, it's at the end of the day, it's can you stick to financial fundamentals and not go crazy either which way, right? Right now there's a lot of people scared. Interest rates are high, you know, and everything is quote unquote overpriced. But is it really? For me, it's if you want to have a conversation about affordability, fine, right? The affordability is out of control. But is it overpriced? The market seems to disagree, right? Because people are still paying prices that are quote unquote overpriced, and it's been like that for forever, right? So it's a hard pill to swallow.
And it's like inflation and salary and prices, they're always going to be like this. They're always going to be within reach, but that does not mean that the dream stops or that the machine stops moving. We get through it. Our generations before, you know, earning a quarter an hour versus, we're earning $25 an hour. It's all relative. And some people just see, percentages and they completely freak out. But, having a conversation about, okay, what is it that you make? If you're making $27,000 a year, you're not going to afford a $500,000 house. Let's take it back a notch. Let's look at other alternatives. But
And I think that's an important factor. Like those who are willing to look at logic and then recalibrate and pivot as needed, I feel like are those who will continue to succeed, right? Like, thankfully, I mean, I guess it depends on the report you look at. The millennials and the Gen X's and down to the Gen Z's are apparently now are realizing that things are not going to be rainbows and butterflies, right? And rather than complaining about what our take home salary is as opposed to the cost of living isn't really behooving anyone, right? Except for some clickbait article, right? And so what the interesting thing that I'm seeing is that there is a growing number of people who are deciding to say, hey, look, if my salary's not cutting it, then we need to figure out other creative hacks, so to speak, on how to bridge this gap one way or another, right? People are getting wealthy every day. And if the salary isn't going to cut it, then we need to figure out more creative ways to do it. And so over time, one of the things I love to get into is I like to nerd out over wealth creation, right? Like generating wealth, but taking it from the framework of those who have done it. And for my CPA brain, I like to look at the tax benefits, right? Most of the people who are wealthy, they may make a good sizable income, but what seems to be another main major area of focus is keep what you make, get taxed less legally, right? So, I mean, real estate is going to be one of those, and I think will continue to be one of the most tax advantaged asset you will ever own. but it depends on how you maneuver, right? So for me, I think you're gonna still get a lot of people. Oh, but I want the 4 bedroom house in, I want it in Fresh Meadows, right? Or Fresh Meadows, and I think it should be 750. I'm like, you're out of your goddamn mind. Yeah. But but it's like, oh, but it shouldn't be this expensive. Well, I mean, it shouldn't be 100 degrees outside either. Life is what it is, and we figure out what you right. And so, one of the things I figured out was, well, rather than stepping away from the dream, maybe we make some concessions, right? And then we build up to your dream when the opportunity allows. But I think I need to make like swag of like time in market is better than timing market, right? Because you will time yourself out and you will sit yourself on the sidelines for the rest of eternity. That's the other side of what breaks my heart. And I know as realtors, a lot of people are gonna look at it as, well, you're just trying to make a sale. Yes, I am trying to make a sale, but I've also seen trends. Right? I, you've owned and sold a house, right? And I forced myself to buy this place that we live in, and if I'm being honest, I didn't feel great about buying. I also wanted my Taj Mahal, right? I wanted my Taj Mahal, and looking back, I'm glad that I did what I did, because I'm looking at rent prices as opposed to what I would have paid then and now, and I'm like, yeah, that's crazy talk.
I mean, even in my own personal search, I kind of, what I wanted and what I can be realistic with. I I have to have that conversation with myself. I have to have that conversation with my clients and say, okay, absolutely look at your wish list, and then kind of, I'm doing that right now with a client, and I would love to tell them that they can afford it and they may be able to, but there's a little window there that's probably not. So I said, I'm gonna let you look and window shop for the next 2 weeks. How's that sound? Oh yeah, that's great. We'll touch base in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, we're gonna say, I'm looking at, $700, $1.2 million houses. Did you find anything in your $300,000 budget? And I know the answer is going to be no. So then let's take a look at your wish list. Let's look at what you can and can't do without, and go from there.
I think part of our jobs is going to be always to translate what the market is saying and providing enough education or information to our clients and ourselves so that we can make reasonable expectations and realistic expectations, right, in terms of what our money will get us. And I mean, in the investor space, it gets interesting because there are more maneuvers we can take, and I find that typically in those particular spaces, there's a different pain threshold, right? This where it gets interesting, right? There, for a person who's trying to buy their dream home, I'm finding less and less folks are willing to suffer through inconveniences. But for those who are willing to really take that patient approach of, look, even if as long as the bones are good, we'll take the warts and we'll work through it. We think of it as a long-term thing. Those are some pretty amazing clients, right? Because sometimes they understand that unfortunately, your $100,000 salary isn't going to cover a $1.5 million house, right? Especially at 7% interest rates, you're not gonna cut it, right? But I think this is where we come into play. You have speak, like for me, it's always before you do anything else. Talk to your lender. Figure out where you are financially, and figure out what you need to, like. A lot of people stop at, hey, let me know what I'm qualified for. How about you ask them what you need to do to make your situation better, right? Find an ethical, morally responsible financial advisor. Figure out what your next step. Sometimes it's just maybe stop spending money on nonsense subscriptions, right? Or you just need to go out and make more money, right? But either which way, at least you have a plan forward. But based off of what your situation is now, for me, it's like, what can I reasonably buy and or whatever we could maneuver through and figure out what steps we can take to get to the point where we want to be. I think that a lot of people have this all or nothing approach, and it gets people in trouble. But that's my soapbox stance.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. The part of our responsibility is to get them to see that there are, there are ways of getting what they want and not necessarily breaking their bank, and seeing and showing them that there are going to be some instances where they're going to have to be a little more flexible.
You want a mini mansion for you know nothing. My thing lately has just been, look, if you want that price point for that neighborhood for whatever, I think you really need to look into affordable housing. So my strong suggestion for me, that's just been my spiel. And they're like, oh, either they're like, oh, I didn't know, they look into it, or they're like, oh, how dare you? I'm like, well, if I could look through listings all day, if the cheapest one that I'm finding is $3,500, and you're asking for 1,500, there's either the world is crazy or you're not thinking correctly, right? So, I mean, what do you want to do? The only other option that I could think of for you is to apply for Section 8 or voucher program or something of that nature. Assuming that you qualify for the program, I think that is your best route. And you need patience because you're not most likely not going to immediately get a place. But if you're if you're demanding 1,500 anyway, when the market is double that, I think you're gonna be waiting either which way, right? So I know you probably have a rest of the day that I'm taking up a lot of your time. So worst comes to worst, look, I do want to keep tabs here and there. So expect me to kind of jump into your DMs or your emails and say, hey, like, what's new? And as things progress, maybe we'll do another episode because I do want to kind of push you along. But in the meantime, yeah, it's something that I take joy in. Take pride and joy. Because obviously this, I will not say that you need high intelligence for this job, but you do need thick skin. You need damn good, like, strong work ethic, right? And so when I do see people hit evolutions, right, and they see that they make it, for me, it's like it's an amazing feat, right? And I think that's the thing, right? Because realistically, again, you don't need necessarily high intelligence. I think a lot of people like to poo-poo the realtor, right? The realtor doesn't need to be, but on the flip side, you need to be good at your job to hit numbers. Like, that's just there's no way around it, right? And so when I see folks with that, like, that spark, that grit, that moxie, for me, I just, like, I want to see them do well, right? And so, like, for me, like, I haven't been in the industry long enough to see it often enough for me to get jaded by it. So every time I see someone, like, on the come up, I'm like, damn, let's go, you know. So
So how long have you been an agent?
that is a good question. I always get this twisted.
Well, if you can't remember, it really hasn't been, you know.
It hasn't been that long. It's just I have, like, such a trash memory. So June, I know, like, my anniversary is in June, so I'm either in year 2 or year 3. So, I usually like to preface any interaction, like, just please don't get it twisted. I'm not some kind of, like, super veteran, or, right. I'm just a curious dude who likes to ask questions. um, uh, so, but, at least for now, I imagine there's going to be a lot of more work and a lot of grinding ahead for you, but sometimes you're not going to be afraid to, get down to it. So I'm excited to see what this coming year is going to have in tow for you. But in the meantime, if people want to reach out, where can they find you?
Well, clients, prospects, as well as personal questions, comments, concerns, info sharing, any of that. It's 516-946-4912.
Cool. And with that said, thank y'all for your time, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.